Ooh, ow. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining me again once more. So, this morning's installation on this diary, and hoping we'll have conversations afterwards. Pardon the Medusa look. I promise you won't turn to stone. um, you know, in the other videos, I have talked about how I came to Christ. I have mentioned how um, parts of the journey in getting saved and all of that, in being saved. Um, I'll come back to the full storytelling of, I guess, up to where I am now. I promise it won't take all 30 years plus. But what I wanted to say is something that's a little bit sad for me. I guess it should be a whole lot of sad, but anyhow, the point is this. When I got saved, like I said, I've said it in I think 3 videos already. I had no idea what I was doing. All right. And then with time, I grew up in the 80s, 90s. And the 80s, I was a child, barely remember anything about the gospel really, or Jesus really. I mean, it was pinhead amount of information, I guess, that you could say I had. I mean, I remember even writing in a diary I had back then. Somebody gave me a Christmas sticker, and it was a Christmas tree, and with gift wrap boxes underneath the tree. And I remember looking at the sticker. I don't know why I took the sticker, I stuck it in my diary, and then I looked at the box more than the tree, really. I don't remember why I did that, but I remember looking at the box and the boxes, with all their colors and everything. And I remember looking at these boxes and thinking, this is about Jesus. And I was like, I don't even know this guy, so I really didn't know much of muchness. And then with time, then you're a teenager. Well, I'm a teenager, I was a teenager, and all I could think about is absolute freedom. I love being out at night. I love being out, I don't know. I just wanted to be out. I guess this is what teenagers do. And one of the things that occurred to me every so often, we'd have the conversations and generally and what have you with friends and people that I knew, is the heaven and hell concept. And it was a concept. And I would say that growing up, my biggest foundation was mythology. I loved mythology. I guess my grandmother was a bit of a storyteller, a very good storyteller. I loved reading. And then in the school that I attended, we had a library. And from my recollection, no other school had a library. And we had an excellent collection of books. And these books, obviously, children's stories, so there were all kinds of stories. There were stories about pirates, and that's where we went. My friend and I, we loved all this. So we'd read all about Vikings and the Greeks and that kind of thing. Not so much the Romans, but the Greeks, especially their mythology. So that was my foundation, more than biblical, And so, but there was always this thing of fearing God. And I feared God in the sense of Zeus, who was a temperamental tyrant who just threw lightning bolts around, for the love of, I've got too many lightning bolts, let me reduce my stash. I don't know why he did it, but, I can't remember. But that was my idea of who God was. But the heaven and hell conversation, concept, ideas, thoughts were never far from my mind, really, And I remember one of the things I used to think a lot about is where I wanted to spend my eternity. And for me, eternity, to be quite realistic, as a teenager, eternity was the length, was the double maths class. I mean, we used to have double lessons. We had single lessons, so you'd have your geography, English, Setswana, etc., etc. And then sometimes you'd have double maths and then geography. I mean, that was pain. That was eternity. That was how eternity felt for little old me in high school, maths. And I would think then, oh, this is hell, you know? But the bottom, the real crux of this hell concept for me is that I had a sense of how much I could take, so I had this sense of my ability to endure. And I figured, well, heaven or hell, one has got to endure either, and the hell part of it, I think I was about 16 or so. I figured, you know what, in hell's where the party's at. And that's where I'm going. And my hometown is semi-desert, so incredibly hot when it gets hot and very dry. And it's the kind of heat that, you can fry an egg outside. Leave your pan, put some oil, leave the egg, leave the pan there, crack an egg, and your egg will cook, will fry good and proper. It's that hot. And I remember when my son was small, he loved walking around barefoot, and even in this heat. So he had little pock marks, under his feet, these little holes because of the heat. That's how hot it is. Now I figured I could, I was like, I could do heat, I'm good with heat. It's the cold I had a problem. I told myself I have a problem with. So I could go to, I could happily go to hell. And besides, that's where all the party people are. And pardon my references, I mean, no good, no harm, but I figured that's where all the musicians were. Because they didn't sing hymns, that was my thinking. I wasn't trying, assigning them to hell or anything like that. I just figured, well, that's where the nice music is. I mean, who wants to go to heaven and sing dirges forever? I mean, that's hell. That was my thinking. And so then fast forward to my late 20s, early 30s, a friend of mine shared an apartment with some of his friends. And he was the only one amongst the dudes who was saved. And he would faithfully every Sunday morning, get on his bike and cycle, I don't know how many Ks to church, but he did. So basically, the point I'm making about this particular friend of mine is that there was effort, great effort in him presenting himself within the four walls of worship, okay? And he didn't just do that. He connected with other believers during the week, and I remember we used to talk about the Bible and that kind of thing. And he was what I guess most of us would call a good Christian, He was a very sweet guy. He is. I mean, we lost touch, but he was a very sweet guy, and I guess you could say his life was his testament, was his testimony about God's presence in his life. So hold on to that thought, okay? So he worked as well. He's a very good guy, He was diligent in his work, in his studies, good friend, almost flawless, as much as a human can be. And down the line, not down the line, with time, I mean, his friends were big on partying. They also had their jobs, and they would compare themselves with him. I mean, he used to tell me. And they compared themselves in a, like, for example, they would say things like, You work, we work too. What makes you think you're better than us? Oh yeah, goody goody two shoes off to church, and they would mock him as he leaves to go to church on Sunday morning when they were sleeping off hangovers. They would tease him and mock him, call him names, like, I mean, people give you like, I've worn glasses all my life. So I was called 4 hours throughout primary school. So, that kind of relative mocking nicknames. And they would do that. So then something unfortunate and tragic happened. The guys were out. My friend was home at the flat. Middle of the night, 2 a.m.ish or something like that. The guys come rushing in, all covered in blood, and one of the guys had been stabbed, I think it was, but it was tragic, it was horrible. And so, and the entire time, this guy, the injured friend, and if I remember correctly, the friends, they called him, they brought him back to the flat because he kept calling my friend's name, calling him and calling him and calling him. And why? He didn't call his mother. He was surrounded by his other friends. I don't know how many friends there were in the flat. I mean, guys can make do with very little, especially bachelors, so he didn't call them, but he called this friend. My heart says to me, he called him because he was in a dire situation. He could feel his life sustenance seeping out of him and knew he was not in a good place. I don't want to scare anybody. This is not a turn or burn, but it's food for thought. It's food for thought. Consider eternity. Guys, we are body, spirit, and soul. Our spirits live forever. And they've got to live somewhere after the soul leaves the body. After the soul and spirit leave the body. When the body remains here and the real us exits and does not return back to this flesh and this particular earth suit, as some have called it. Jesus is not just a way out. I know, I mean, I'll share it later and whatever, but many times for me, when I think about why I got saved, why I got and stayed saved, is because eventually I had a change of heart. I was like, actually, you know what? Hell ain't where I want to go. Hell is not meant to be fun. But that's another story for another day. So for today, I just wanted to just leave this one with that. And yes, if you're not a Christian and you come across my Dujobi here, it's not an indictment of whatever your beliefs are. Like I said, it's food for thought. And the beauty of this is that the Bible, which preaches Jesus, said that he wants all to be saved. And salvation is such a big thing. It's such a huge. It's an event. It's a happening. It's a lifestyle. It's so much. It's so much. But part of salvation is being saved out of hell. That's just one of the things, just one, just the one. So there's more, and there's more that is even better than just being saved out of hell. So just for now, I just wanted to drop this one, and yeah, consider eternity. As a teenager, my eternity was double maths. And as a grown-up, eternity became more philosophical. And then I had a child, and eternity took on new meaning, because I would look at this little baby, this little boy, and this little life that looked at me with such utter trust. And as a single mom, I was head of this family, and I had to ask myself, not obviously, not overtly, but where am I leading this little person? You know, am I leading this little person? I knew I could not abandon him in any shape or form, but one of the most alarming ideas was to abandon him in a place where he doesn't have Christ. It was one of the, it was not in those words, but those were those were the actions I took. At that time I had no words. I can put it into words now. 20 odd years later, I didn't know what I was doing then. I was more terrified than anything, being a single mom. But it made me really kind of focus, you know. Hell was not just a concept. And remembering this friend of mine this morning, I just thought to seriously say, consider, just consider eternity and what shape it will take for you and your loved ones. Okay. Sorry for such a somber topic, but yeah. Thank you for taking time. And more than I love you, Jesus loves you. Take care.